Well, morena, everyone. It's good to be back with my church family, and I love baptisms. I love it when people, go public with their faith. In fact, just as I was we were doing a meet and greet, I learned a new Spanish word for awesome, sobadenti. Sobadenti, do you want to learn that with me? Sobadenti? I probably butchered it, eh? I probably butchered it. But I think we should yell that out really loudly as we cheer for Sophia. She's probably back here somewhere, right? So sobadenti, we'll kind of yell out really clearly. Oh, say it again. Sobadenti. Hopefully you got that. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Whoa, yeah. It takes me a while to get language right. Thank you for your patience with me. But I've been away, just camping with my family. We're down at Riri Point in East Auckland, and then down at Hawke's Bay for a while. Just fantastic, isn't it? In New Zealand summer, just enjoying change of pace. Isn't it good for all of us? But I think we're incredibly blessed as a church too with the emerging preaching team that we have here at GCC. I mean, didn't they do a great job? Really have done a brilliant time these last few weeks. And I want to thank you too for the way you've encouraged them, getting beside them, even during the message, just kind of cheering them on. First week of our series, if you're around, John Theakston talked about how my God is steadfast. Many of you that week committed to eating more popsicles on sticks and taking those sticks to write attributes of God than having them at your table to talk about God. It was an excuse for my kids to remind me to buy them more popsicles over summer. And then Zephyr talked about how my God is faithful, and we were challenged to remember. And the stones that you might have seen as you came in are these reminders of what we know to be true about God. Remembering God's faithfulness in the past helps us trust Him into the future. And then last week, Simon led us to discover how my God is present with people from all generations. And I trust you've had moments this week when you have known for sure that God is present. I think anchoring ourselves in the character of God is vital for us as we begin a new year. So today, I'm going to talk about another aspect of God. My God is a safe place. Do you ever have a hiding place as a kid? Somewhere you ran to when you were afraid or where you were in trouble and you wanted to get away from everything? My grandma had this tree, big tree hut at the corner of her property in Hastings, big old house in front of it, big oak tree. And that tree hut was my hiding place. Up there, I felt safe, I felt secure, and I had this great vantage point where I could see anybody coming, the grown-ups that might be coming after me after I did something wrong. And I thought I was out of reach, or at least I thought I was out of reach. Looking back now, there was just a ladder there with like 3 or 4 rungs. Structure probably wasn't up to today's health and safety standards. And besides, it would be the one place my parents would come to look for me if I did something wrong, right? Wasn't the smartest or safest hiding place. A lot of years have gone by since those days, but the desire to find a safe place hasn't left me. And the need for a safe place hasn't disappeared. I mean, just think of some of the challenges out in our world at the moment. I Googled this week some of the biggest threats facing us in 2019. It brought up quite a list. The USA government shutdowns, the uncertainties over Brexit, the impact of these things on our political climate, cyber threats. People spoke of a viral pandemic. Apparently between 1940 and 2004, there were 335 new infectious diseases among human beings. Somebody said, what might happen this year? Might be time for a new one. People are talking about a future economic collapse, though people are always talking about a future economic collapse. And then I read in the news this past week or so that Auckland's expecting a volcanic eruption, that it's not a matter of if, but when. And you turn on History Channel and somebody will say we're due for another extinction. See, aren't you glad you came today? Aren't you feeling so much better about the year ahead? And those things are out there, but let's face it, there's ones closer to home, aren't there? Kids are growing up. At one time, they had this kind of kind, quiet, cute disposition, but now you feel like at times you have to walk on eggshells around them in case they turn into the volcanic, into some kind of volcanic eruption or the Incredible Hulk. Or you have a new baby in the household and you're just trying to juggle everything that needs to be done. There's work challenges on the horizon, though we probably don't want to talk about work yet because we still feel like we're trying to seize holiday mode. There's relationship challenges. You discover more about how different the other person is. You begin to wonder where the next argument might actually lead. The struggles of getting older, pain in your body, the way small tasks can be fraught with difficulty now, the deep loneliness you experience, the way you feel passed over as people look to younger people. We all need a safe place, don't we? Top of the disasters out there and the things that we face kind of in our own orbits. In addition to all that, we're all conscious of the things that we do wrong. It's less than 3 weeks into the new year already, but some of you already, as you look at this year and you look at some of the things you've done, you're actually ashamed. And you've whispered to yourself, how could I be so foolish? And you just want a place to hide from the world around you and the shame you already experience. And things happen in our lives, don't they? And we feel afraid, we feel scared, we feel ashamed. If I asked you if the greatest gift you could receive today would be a temporary hiding place, a secure and safe place, just even for a time, I bet a whole lot of hands would go up. And our passage today reminds us that there is such a place, a safe, secure place. Some of you know I have this deep love for the First Testament. After all, these books, often known as the Old Testament or Hebrew Scriptures, I think are often ignored by a lot of us and much to our peril. But the setting of today's passage goes back 3,500 years ago to a time when the Israelite community had really were being formed into a nation. They had been in slavery in Egypt, and God had brought them through the wilderness into this promised land. But they were still, being formed as a nation. They weren't used to making their own decisions because decisions had always been made for them because they were slaves. There was still a developing judicial system. The population was all spread out. Societies weren't all that well organized. There was no police force as such. And, the way that people kept law and order was pretty much by this aggressive form of tribal crime and punishment. For example, if somebody in your family lost his or her life at the hands of another person, your family would call this meeting, and your family would appoint, in Hebrew, what's called a goel, a blood avenger. You get the idea. This representative of your family was tasked with the job to track down whoever killed this other member of your family. Because the idea in society was a life for a life. If somebody died, a life also was to be taken. Remember, this is pre-police, pre-lawyers, pre-courtrooms. This goel, this blood avenger, was appointed to bring family justice. But a problem arose in this, Middle East culture around accidental homicides or unintentional deaths. I mean, it's one thing to have a death sentence on you for premeditated murder, but what about accidents? Even foolish accidents. So in these Old Testament books of Deuteronomy and Numbers and Joshua, we see God step into the situation and he addresses the problem by laying out what we now know as cities of refuge. And the purpose of these cities of refuge is laid out in verses like Joshua chapter 20, verse 3. It says, anyone who kills another person accidentally and unintentionally can run to one of these cities. They will be places of refuge from relatives seeking revenge for the person who was killed. The book of Deuteronomy, which kind of also talks about these cities of refuge, gives the example perhaps of two men who were out cutting firewood. And they're out there with their axes. And one of the axes, unfortunately, has a loose, axe head on it. So as he's kind of, doing his chopping, the axe head flies off and unfortunately kills the mate that he's with. Now, obviously, this guy, never meant to take a person's life. Perhaps it was a little careless of him of not making, he didn't make sure his axe head was right there, but he didn't mean to do it. But now his life is about to face, terrible consequences. This other family will be getting together and they'll be appointing their Goel, their blood avenger, to come after this guy who accidentally killed this other guy. And that's where these cities of refuge came in. So following the death of someone, the person who was wielding that axe with the loose axe head on it, killed his mate, didn't mean to do it. He runs off really quickly to one of these cities of refuge. And when he would get there, he would call out for the city elders and they would hold this preliminary trial. And if they thought it was unintentional, they would let him into the city and they would keep him safe in the city of refuge. And when the Goel, the blood avenger, came, seeking to bring his own kind of family justice, they would keep the Goel out and keep the person who had accidentally committed the crime inside the city gates. So we read things like this in Joshua 20. Upon reaching one of these cities, the one who caused the death will appear before the elders of the city gate and present his case. They must allow him to enter the city and give him a place to live among them. If the relatives of the victim come to avenge the killing, the leaders must not release the slayer to them, for he killed the other person unintentionally and without previous hostility. So after the fair trial has been held, if it was deemed an accident, this guy could stay within the city of refuge. And as long as he stayed within the city walls, as long as he stayed within the city of refuge, he was protected from any blood avenger who was out to bring his own form of justice. See, all this kind of prevented this retaliation from getting out of hand. Unending killings where each family sought to bring what they saw as just and some sort of balance. First thing I want you to see about these cities of refuge is that these cities were there for people who needed help and people who needed protection. Something happened in their lives that they could never dream of and never wish for in a million years. And now they were running for their life, but they were safe in one of these cities of refuge. Book of Joshua talks about where these cities were, and these places probably don't mean a thing to us, but I'll show you the point here in a moment. Following cities were designated as cities of refuge, Kadesh of Galilee and the hill country of Naphtali and Shechem, and just goes on mentioning all these names. So let me kind of illustrate what's happening here. So let's imagine that this auditorium is the land of Israel. So the land of Israel has this Jordan River flowing in the middle. So we'll kind of assume that Jordan River is through here. So I'll grab one of these kind of floaties because no doubt some of the kids went swimming in the Jordan River. So this is the Jordan River through here. On the west side, there were 3 cities of refuge. On the east side, there were 3 cities of refuge because often you couldn't get past the Jordan River to get from one side to another. So over here, I'll get 3 people to stand in a moment to kind of remind us about kind of where they are. So over here, Alan, if I can get you to stand. So let's imagine one city of refuge here. And, another city of refuge here. Yeah, thank you. And then probably, where are we? Just over here. Sir, do you mind just standing up too? There we go. And so there's 3 over here. And then there's another 3 over this side. Actually, Alan, I'll get you to sit down because you're a little too close to the front for me. Where are we? No offense. Yeah, can you stand up? Thank you, perfect. And then over here, let's imagine we had, where are we? Okay. Yeah, if I could get you to stand up too. Thank you. And then we have, where are we? About here probably. Mark, if I can get you to stand. You're trying not to give me eye contact, as a lot of people are. And do you mind standing up as well? Is that okay? Thank you. And so, as you can see, this is probably the geography of Israel with 3 cities on each side all around the place. And what I hope you start to realize is that within easy access, there was a city close to wherever you would have lived in Israel. In fact, when you look at the map, it's coming up now, on both sides of the Jordan, within about 25 to 35 kilometers of where you lived, you would be able to get to one of these cities of refuge. It's about a day's journey at most for most places, regardless of what extremity, how north or west or east or south you were, that there was one of these cities somewhere that you could get to. And in fact, you would probably be running, and so you're going to get there fast because you know that there is a goel likely on your tail wanting to kill you, and so you're running to one of these cities of refuge. In fact, the scriptures tell us these cities of refuge were so well signposted as well. So the Hebrew word for refuge was laid out on these signposts, and people would know exactly where they needed to go. The Jerusalem Encyclopedia talks about how the roads were paved to these cities, so people, again, had easy access to each one of these cities, regardless of where they were. Because most people would have ignored those signs, but when you have done something wrong, accidentally, unintentionally, and you know your life is now in danger, you want to know clearly where to go and where to find safety. Let's give these guys a bit of a hand for helping me out. You guys can sit down. Thank you. So I hope you realize these cities of refuge were within everybody's reach. Another point I want to make is these cities of refuge were for all types of people. Listen to this from Joshua 20. These cities were set apart for all the Israelites as well as the foreigners living among them. Anyone who accidentally killed another person could take refuge in one of these cities. In this way, they could escape being killed in revenge prior to standing trial before the local assembly. So these cities of refuge were for all types of people. The Israelite community, but not just those within this faith community. It didn't matter who you were, didn't matter what age you were, what ethnicity you had. In fact, some of the scriptures talk about you might have been in Israel doing a trade from another country just even for a little bit of time, and something goes wrong, but the city of refuge was there for you to flee to as well, for your protection. See, cities of refuge didn't mean anything to the average person on the streets. But when you have a blood avenger on your tail, hot on your heels, cities of refuge were the most important places on the planet because they provided you protection. They provided you safety. This is a beautiful picture of what the church is meant to be. Church should always be a place where people can come just as they are and find a safe place. No need to pretend. No need to dress up and put on a front. You know, these are to be places that should be accessible to all types of people because God accepts all types of people and invites us to come just as we are. You see, what I love about our church is the way we're continuing to grow in these values reflected on the walls. Values like hospitality, inclusivity, generosity, hope. A place where everybody is invited. A place where there's room for everybody around the table. A place where there's no need to pretend, where people genuinely want to serve and help. And people ask you, how are you really? And they actually want to hear. And you feel like you're able to tell people to. A place where the primary concern is not on what happened yesterday, but what's happening today and what can happen tomorrow as we embody a community of hope. So I love the feedback we're having from some of our newcomers. Then when people approach our doors and come into these doors here at Green Lane Christian Centre, they sense a safe place where they can come. In fact, one person said to me recently, I felt like I was coming home, even though I'm just new. Love that. Another aspect about these cities of refuge is that these cities of refuge reflect the very heart of God. You know, the idea of these hiding places is bound up in the very nature and character of God, is it not? He is the one who is all about providing a safe place for people who are feeling oppressed. His heart is all about providing refuge for the person who feels like someone's out to get them. It's in the very heart of God to provide an asylum for those who are afraid and running and so weary because of what's happening to them. Psalms often pick up on this idea of a hiding place. In fact, one of my favorite Psalms is this one here in Psalm 91. Those who live in the shelter of the Most High will find rest in the shadow of the Almighty. This I declare about the Lord. He alone is my refuge, my place of safety. He is my God, and I trust him. He will cover you with his feathers. He will shelter you with his wings. His faithful promises are your armor and protection. What lovely imagery coming through here. I mean, like have you ever seen little chicks hopping around, chirping, pecking, doing, chick stuff? And all of a sudden, the chicks and the mother hen all become aware that there's this predator on the loose in the vicinity, and the mother hen just lifts both wings simultaneously, and suddenly, within a few seconds, the baby chicks kind of just disappear under those wings. And they hide there, and they feel safe there. And the chicks, I guess, say to each other in the darkness, "Yikes, did you see the size of the teeth of that dog out there? But mum's protecting us now." And they feel safe and secure, hidden under those wings. And the psalmist picks up on that and says, this is very near the heart of God. It's bound up in the very essence of God to provide a hiding place for his children, under his wings, as it were. And that's what these cities of refuge were for people who were running. Today, God is spreading out his protective wings. Is folding in his frightened, weary, beaten down, worn out children right under those very wings. I believe he's speaking to people even this morning. The exhausted parent concerned about the trajectory the kids are on. And he's whispering, hide here for a while. Or he's saying to the widow who wakes up every morning to this lonely sadness, come and rest in the shelter of the Most High. Or he says to the adult child worried about what's happening to their mum and dad as they age, just regroup here, rest, recuperate. He says to the spouse worried about where the next argument might lead, come to me and find rest. He says to the person facing more tests and more medical procedures, get away for a time, just renew your strength. You see, these cities of refuge reflect the very heart of our God. They were a safe place that provided help and protection. They were a safe place within everybody's reach. And they were a safe place for all types of people. One other aspect to these cities of refuge that's easy to gloss over. In fact, I almost missed it this week in my preparation. Let's say you had to run to one of these cities of refuge and you'd been tried and you'd been accepted and you'd have to live in the city of refuge permanently. If you ever stepped out of it, this Goel, this blood avenger, could seek his own justice, as it were. But you were safe only as you stayed within the city of refuge for the rest of your life. But there was one thing that could enable you to leave those gates safely and permanently, and it was the death of the high priest. This is what we read in Joshua. Slayer should have stayed inside the city of refuge until the death of the high priest. But after the death of the high priest, the slayer may return to his own property. Do you kind of get that? When the high priest dies, the person who had accidentally killed this other person is now safe to return to his own city. Apparently, the death of the high priest somehow removes the shame and the guilt of the situation. And in some sense, his death of the high priest, albeit from natural causes, becomes a substitute that dealt with the guilt of the person who had accidentally killed this other. And what's more, the Goel, the blood avenger, would know this. Somehow he wouldn't be seeking justice because the need in that culture for a life has now been satisfied in the death of the high priest. I was blown away as I sat there with this idea this week. I mean, isn't that a beautiful picture of what Jesus has done for you and me? It's a picture I've never heard anybody speak about before. But the Old Testament is full of these pointers and pictures about pointing us to Jesus and his wonderful work that he does for us. That's why the writer of Hebrews says the old system under the law of Moses was only a shadow, a dim preview of the good things to come, not the good things themselves. And all in these books like Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, and here in Joshua, all pointing to something about who Jesus is and what he's done. How Jesus here effectively fulfills the very purpose of these cities of refuge. That now in him we find protection and safety and freedom. So later in the New Testament, the writer of Hebrews reminds us that Jesus is our high priest. We looked at this a few weeks back, how he is the kind of high priest we need because he's holy and blameless, unstained by sin. He is our ultimate substitute. So our safe place is no longer in some city of refuge. It's no longer in some kind of geographical piece of land. It's now in a person. That person's name is Jesus. So the writer of Hebrews goes on and says, therefore, we who have fled to him for refuge can have great confidence as we hold to the hope that lies before us. This hope is a strong and trustworthy anchor for our souls. That Jesus is a safe place for people who need help and protection. That Jesus is a safe place within everyone's reach. That Jesus is a safe place for all types of people. But Jesus goes beyond the ancient cities of refuge, because they were just designed for people who had unintentionally and accidentally committed a crime. That's where their brief stopped. Jesus does that, but he goes on to include all the intentional wrongs that we have done as well. And we still find a safe place in him. It says exactly what I need to know as I step into 2019. I need to know that my God is a safe place. And as you step into 2019, you need to remind yourself that there is a safe place where you can run, and it's in the very character of God. But here's the thing. There's a couple of moves you need to take if you're going to experience that safe place. You see, the ancient people never found refuge in that city by just knowing about the city of refuge. They might even see a sign that pointed to the city of refuge, but unless they ran to that city of refuge, they wouldn't be safe. They were doomed. And the first move you and I need to make is to stop placing confidence in the things around us that actually aren't genuinely safe. I think a lot of us do this, don't we? As people, we like to consider ourselves independent and self-sufficient. But if you're going to find rest today, if you're going to find a place where you can come to with your past mistakes that will deal with the past and the shame and the guilt and the fear, then you need to acknowledge that you're not able to stand up by yourself. That all of us here are very needy people. But most people place their confidence in things that actually aren't all that safe. In some ways, they're much like my grandmother's treehouse. I thought it was safe. I even felt safe at the time. But looking back, I now realize this wouldn't even pass the basic health and safety tests. And as I said before, it's just a ladder of 3 or 4 rungs. Anybody could get to me. Well, I might have felt safe, but I didn't have the reality of safety. And as we get older, I wonder if we just exchange one type of feeble treehouse for another and for another. So you might think of your family name as that, strong treehouse, or your career, or the savings in your bank account, or the group of friends you have, or the skills, or your appearance, or whatever it might be. And it's easy to trust these things to kind of get us through whatever predicament we come to. But believe me, if all of these things are just like my grandmother's treehouse, they have the appearance of some degree of safety, protection, security, but there isn't any reality to these things. Yes, people may like you because of what you have or the name that you have or what you do or what you look like, but all of this as so many of us learn, just changes so quickly. And if you're placing your confidence in these things, you actually have every reason to be afraid in 2019. Because the economy might tank, or you age, or people let you down, or the company restructures, and the list just goes on and on and on in terms of what can happen, right? So our very first move, even though it's big and it's hard, is to actually stop trusting these other things to save us. Our next move then is to move away from these things, but then to trust Jesus as your safe place. To access that help that's available, we need to call out to him and admit that something or someone is chasing us down and wearing us out. It's admitting that unless you find a city of refuge, a hiding place, wings to crawl under, you're done for. And so you cry out, I can't outrun this one. My only hope is some city of refuge. And obviously these days, you don't have to run to a monastery. You don't have to run to a city of refuge. You don't even have to call a pastor. You can access the refuge of God anytime, anywhere. Some of you don't know what that's like. And so the moment you keep running and running and running. And I want you to hear loud and clear today that, friend, there is a city of refuge nearby. And the gates will swing wide open to you, that there is a safe place where you can run, and is found in a relationship with Jesus. His irrational love for us makes it a joy for him to hide us for a time. Today, I believe that there will be someone who will pray perhaps for the first time and begin a life-changing relationship with Jesus. In a moment or two, I'll lead us into a prayer. But that's never meant to be just a one-off event for us, where we find safety in God and then walk away. Now, every day is this need for us to return and run to Jesus as our safe place. Came across these words from author John Ortberg this week. It says, there is something you can't fix, can't heal, or can't escape. And all you can do is trust God. He says, finding ultimate refuge in God means you become so immersed in his presence, so convinced of his goodness, so devoted to his lordship that you find even the cave is a perfectly safe place to be because he is there with you. It's in these times when you spill out your heart to God. It's like Psalm 62 says, pour out your heart to him, for God is our refuge. And he invites us to come to him and explain to him what's causing us fear and anxiety and heartache. It's like the passwords that open up these gates into the refuge of God are the soul-wrenching words that flow from a heart full of pain when we finally decide that we can trust God. When we tell him just how bad it is, how weary we are, how hopeless we've become, how discouraging the whole situation in front of us seems to be. And as if God takes this honesty, this raw words, and they become like this password that hits the heart of God, and the gates fling wide open and the wings extend for us to find safety. I've felt his arms extend and those gates fling wide open before me. In times in my life when I have come across circumstances that I didn't want to happen, and there are a whole lot of questions and pain and things going through. There's nights when I wake up and fear from the what ifs. There's moments when it's just hard to think about today, let alone tomorrow. But in such moments, I have experienced God as a safe place. Some of those times for me have been when I have sat down to read the Bible and to pray. And it's like in such times, the Spirit of God just whispering, just stay here for a time. Regroup, rest, recuperate. That's why I want to encourage you to find that this habit, this daily habit of reading God's word and praying. Many of the times I've experienced God as a safe place is in the context of people gathering around me to pray. That's why I think it's so vital for each of us to have Christian friends around that we gather with regularly. That's why in a few weeks we'll talk about some new groups and small groups that you have the opportunity to join. At times we need others to wrap their arms around us and just to pray for us. And it's in times like this that you can almost feel the wings of God forming a safe place for you. It's almost like God is saying to you in those times, let me shelter you for a time. Let me shelter you from the cold-hearted spouse. Let me shelter you from the devious business partner. Let me shelter you from the frightening medical report. Let me shelter you from the overwhelming financial debt you're facing. Let me shelter you from the parents who just don't seem to get it. Let me shelter you from children who are saying and doing things that just kind of cut your heart really deep. Friends, what I hope you'll realize today as you step into 2019 is that you will know and experience God as a safe place. In that safe place, you will find that your past does not need to haunt you anymore. In that safe place, you will find that those what-ifs don't need to overshadow you anymore. And in that safe place, you will find that you don't need to run in fear anymore. Because we have the ultimate city of refuge. And the gates are flung wide open, but it's not a piece of land. It's a person who whispers to you and to me, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. Let's pray together. And while our eyes are shut, just wonder if you can kind of ask yourself, what step do you need to make today to ensure that you are moving towards God as your safe place? It might be that you need to begin a daily time with God. What might that look like? Might be just surrounding yourself with Christian friends who remind you that God is a safe place when things come from left field. What move do you need to make to move from what you've been trusting in and moving to place that confidence in God today? Or maybe your move is actually saying yes to Jesus. I'd imagine there'll be people here today who have come to church maybe for the first time as part of a New Year resolution. But it's time to make a conscious decision, choice to encounter God in a personal way. He is for you, but you need to respond to Him today. You need to make that first move. If that's where you are, I encourage you to just quietness of this moment, pray this prayer with me. Jesus, this is the moment where I want to surrender ownership of my life to you. Because of you, Jesus, I hear that my past can be dealt with, that my sins are forgiven. Jesus, I no longer want to trust these other things for my protection and for my security. But now I want to look to you to find my security and my confidence. Thank you that in you I have absolutely no reason to fear. Thank you that you include me in your family just because of what you have done and who you are. And so from this point on, Jesus, I want to follow after you. Help me in this new journey. If you prayed that prayer, I'd love you to come and see me or come and see one of our team or the info desk after the service. We'd love to help you grow in your journey, help you know about our Alpha courses that we have here and what it means to follow after Jesus. I'd like to invite the ushers to come now and to begin passing out our bread and cups. We call this communion as we kind of gather around a table together. These elements remind us of who Jesus is and this wonderful work He's done on our behalf. I think it's a moment as you take this bread and cup, if you just hold it in your hand, in a few minutes we'll take it together. But just talk to God about what's going on for you. Perhaps the things that you're fearful about in the year ahead. The things that you're trying to hide, move beyond, but just find you can't come to him today. Run, flee to him. He is our city of refuge. He is a safe place where you can be protected and find shelter today.